In the quiet town of Dublin, Texas, a series of burglaries shook the community to its core, leaving residents on edge and the night watchman nervous. The thieves showed a peculiar taste, selecting specific items like Hanover brand shirts, and even paused in their spree to enjoy a Dr. Pepper, leaving behind empty bottles as evidence. As the town grappled with the aftermath of the crimes, one thing became clear. Even in the face of danger, the lure of a beloved soda is always irresistible.
Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly.
Before we begin, an ode. An ode to the greatest soda ever created. Yes, the one, the only. In the realm of sodas, you reign supreme, a unique flavor, a nostalgic dream. Dr. Pepper, oh drink of delight, with 23 flavors, you taste so right. From Waco, Texas, you came to be a carbonated wonder so bubbly and free, sorta. Cherry and cola with a hint of spice. A sip of you is like paradise. So here's to you with a fizz and a pop. In every sip, joy does not stop. Dr. Pepper, you're the best by far. A legendary drink, a soda star. Okay, enough of that. A Waco, Texas pharmacist, Charles Alderton, who worked at Morrison's Old Corner drugstore in the 1880s, was the man behind the creation of the drink of odes. In an effort to come up with a drink that was all his own, Charles tried out several taste combinations until he found one that worked. Customers loved the drink so much that it became a staple at the drugstore's soda fountain. After seeing the drink's potential, Morrison, the owner of the corner drugstore, named it Dr. Pepper in honor of a previous boss, Dr. Charles Pepper. Dr. Pepper's distinctive 23 flavor combination set it apart from competing sodas of the day, and demand for it only increased. One of the most famous and popular sodas in American history, Dr. Pepper was bottled and delivered nationwide in due time. Dublin, Texas is significant to Dr. Pepper since it is the site of the world's oldest Dr. Pepper bottling factory. When other bottling operations began using high fructose corn syrup, the Dublin factory, they stuck with pure Imperial brand cane sugar, and they have since it opened in 1891. People traveled great distances to visit the little town of Dublin to see the bottling factory, which became famous for making limited edition Dr. Pepper tastes. And in June of 1938, 4 escapees from the Eastham prison farm made their way the 130 miles to Dublin, where they went on a crime spree. The Eastham prison farm, located near Lovelady, Texas, was a notorious prison facility that operated from 1917 to 1995. It was initially established as a prison for young offenders, but later became known for its harsh conditions and brutal treatment of inmates. The prison was known for its use of the building tender system, where inmates were given authority over other prisoners and used as reinforcers by the prison guards. This system, as you can probably imagine, led to widespread abuse and violence against inmates. I wouldn't want to stay there either. In early June, the men arrived in Dublin, and on Wednesday, June 8th, they went a-robbin'. They held up the Majestic Cafe and took a whole $35, meanwhile binding 3 men with copper wire, including John Ray, the night watchman at the cafe. According to the local newspaper, the Dublin Progress, the instruction given to John was, quote, shoot him if he even moves. John says that he did not even want to move and didn't, end quote. They also cleaned out the shelves of merchandise in Hoffman Brothers Dry Goods, where, according to one of the Hoffman brothers, quote, the burglars knew good shirts as they selected the Hanover brand, end quote. The 4 headed to Reed Motor Company, where they grabbed a brand new 1938 black sedan and headed off the lot and out of Dublin. But the pièce de résistance, before heading out of town, they headed to the Dublin Dr. Pepper Company. The then owner would say that the men breaking into his bottling factory, quote, was the first time he had ever been robbed, and that he had been in business there about half a century, end quote. Somehow these guys blew open the safe and snagged $200 in cash, a $127 cashier's check, and $4,000 in negotiable warehouse cotton receipts. No, I didn't know what those were, but I looked it up. Evidently, back in the day, a cotton warehouse issued a warehouse cotton receipt to show that they had received a certain amount and quality of cotton from a certain person or organization. Because they showed how much the saved cotton was worth, these papers were often used as proof of ownership or as security for loans. They could also be bought and sold on their own as goods, so like just the receipt. And on their way out of the bottling plant, the 4 Dublin Dr. Pepper desperados stopped for just enough time to enjoy a refreshing Dr. Pepper, or 2. The Dublin Progress declared, quote, the boys stopped long enough to drink a Dr. Pepper, for Mr. Prim says that there were empty bottles left, and that a whole case was missing too. The empty bottles had fingerprints on them. It looks like everybody likes Dr. Pepper, doesn't it? End quote. Indeed, Dublin Progress staff writer from 1938. Indeed. Today's drink is, according to its creator, someone at Fox Valley Foodie, quote, the perfect mixed drink for Dr. Pepper lovers. Hey, just like our Dublin Dr. Pepper desperados, and just like me. They say it's a great drink when you need something simple with relatively little prep time or tools required. And I suppose if you could actually find cake vodka, they're probably right. As it is, I couldn't find cake vodka, and the guy at the liquor store says he's not even sure where I could find it. So I made my own version, and man, I thought I couldn't like Dr. Pepper more, but this drink does it. For the cocktail, we're going to take 1 part whipped cream vodka and 1 teaspoon or so of cake batter emulsion, which you can get in baking stores or online, and add all of that to a shaker with ice. Shake until well combined and then strain into a glass with fresh ice. Top with 2 parts of Dr. Pepper and then put a splash, or in my case 5, of grenadine on top. For the mocktail, take 1 part non-alcoholic vodka and a teaspoon of cake batter emulsion and add both to a shaker with ice. Shake until well chilled and combined, and then strain into a glass with new ice. Top with 2 parts Dr. Pepper and a splash or 10 of grenadine on top. Yum! All in all, the Dublin Dr. Pepper desperados made it out of town with $24,497 in cash and car, 2024 value, and $88,000 in cotton receipts, if they still had cotton receipts in 2024. But it turns out that those Dr. Pepper bottles were the downfall of the Dublin bandits, and specifically, their fingerprints. Okay, so call me a bad true crime podcaster, but I really thought fingerprint technology was a relatively new advancement. Am I the only one there? Okay, before you go and comment on something, my social media, the YouTube video if you're watching, or anywhere. How old do you think fingerprint technology is? I'm not going to tell you my answer. It's a little embarrassing. A publication called Fingerprints, written by the British scientist Sir Francis Galton in 1892, let the world know that fingerprints were unique to each person, except like identical twins, right? We're not getting there. We're already too far down the hole. But anyway, based on Sir Francis's book, fingerprint science was born. Juan Vucetich, a police officer in Argentina, used fingerprints to solve a murder case in 1896, making it the first reported use of fingerprints in a criminal investigation. 1896, like well over 100 years ago. The New York Police Department started utilizing fingerprints in its investigations by 1901, making it the first systematic use of fingerprints in the United States. So 1901. Wow. After that, in 1903, the United States Bureau of Criminal Identification set up the country's first fingerprint database. I think they really should have accounted for the fact that they had the technology to match fingerprints, but it was Dublin, Texas, after all. And at that time, in 1938, Dublin had a population of around 3,000 people. The town's economy was primarily based on agriculture and the local businesses that supported the farming community. The biggest thing going on in Dublin was the Dr. Pepper bottling plant, for sure. The 4 men were arrested 1 week later, just under 30 miles away in Iredell, Texas. The fingerprints left on the Dr. Pepper bottles would lead to their conviction for the Dublin robberies. What happened to those men after, and even their names, have been lost to history. I hope they eventually made it out of prison and drank their Dr. Peppers as free men. Eastham Prison Farm, the place where the Dublin Dr. Pepper desperados escaped from before their escapade and eventual capture, remained a place of harsh punishment and hard labor for many years. It finally closed in 1995, and the site is now used for agricultural purposes. A trademark dispute with the Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, which is the company that owns Dr. Pepper now, led to the Dublin Dr. Pepper factory losing its Dr. Pepper license in 2012. And that was the end of an era for Dublin Dr. Pepper. On June 9th of that year, almost 74 years to the day from when the Dublin Dr. Pepper desperados enjoyed the fruits of their labor, Dublin Bottling Works began bottling and selling its own line of fountain drinks, including a vintage cola, retro grape, and several others. All of those, of course, are sweetened with imperial cane sugar. Thanks for hanging out with me. The idea for this caper sprung from a book that I found at a thrift store about the history of Dublin Dr. Pepper, proving that you never know where you'll find your next caper. Speaking of which, if you have story ideas, please let me know. You can comment on YouTube, any of the social media sites, or if you go to capersandcocktails.com, yes, with the "and" spelled out, you can even fill out a contact form that goes straight to my email. I'd love to collaborate with folks too, so please feel free to reach out to me there. Next week, some cyber criminals and a frozen drink to match. I'll see you next week, and remember, there are always alternatives to robbing a Dr. Pepper factory, though I'm not sure why you'd want to explore those alternatives.